Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're jumping into a really powerful moment from ancient history, all about how an entire community made a promise that completely redefined their future. We are diving deep into Nehemiah Chapter 10.
Okay, so this one line right here, this is where we're headed. This single sentence is the big payoff, the absolute heart of the story we're about to unpack. And believe me, it's the promise that changes everything.
And this all leads to a huge question, one we've probably all asked ourselves, right? How do you actually turn regret, that feeling of I messed up, into real, lasting change? It's one thing to feel bad, but it's another thing entirely to build a new future. Well, this ancient story gives us a pretty amazing blueprint. Now, to really get why this promise in chapter 10 is such a big deal, we've got to back up just a little bit. See, the story doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It starts with profound regret and this huge public moment of repentance in the chapter right before it, Nehemiah 9. The people of Israel had just gone through this massive public soul searching. They were confessing everything, the sins of their ancestors, their own mistakes, all of it. But here's the crucial part. They realized that just saying sorry wasn't going to cut it. They knew real change needed real action. So, what you see is this really deliberate process unfolding. It started with that emotional, spiritual confession. Then they took a hard look at their own history to understand how they got there. And all of that led them to this final, huge step, making a formal, written, binding agreement. They decided, let's put this promise in writing and seal it.
And when I say seal it, I mean it. This wasn't just some vague pinky promise. This was a formal document, a covenant with actual signatures. So who exactly stepped up and put their name on the dotted line?
The record gives us a super specific number, 83. 83 leaders put their official seal on this document. And that detail is so important because it shows this wasn't just some symbolic gesture. This was a documented, official act of commitment. It was like signing a new constitution for their community. And the commitment started right at the very top. You've got Nehemiah, the governor, the top political guy. You've got the priests and Levites, all the spiritual leaders. And you've got the chiefs of the people, the heads of all the major families. I mean, this was everybody, a truly unified front. But here's what's so incredible, and maybe the most powerful part of all. It didn't stop with the leaders. The text makes it super clear that everyone else, we're talking men, women, even kids who were old enough to get what was going on, they all joined in the oath. This wasn't a top-down order. This was a grassroots movement where every single person took ownership. Okay, so they made a promise, but what exactly did they promise to do? This wasn't some vague, hey, we'll try to be better. Nope. It was built on 3 specific, tangible, life-altering commitments that would reshape their entire society. Let's break them down. They zeroed in on 3 core areas of life: their identity, their time, and their resources. These 3 promises were the practical foundation, the nuts and bolts of their renewed relationship with God. This was the how behind their vow to change. First up, they pledged to maintain their spiritual purity by no longer intermarrying with the nations around them. Now, it's really important to understand this wasn't about ethnic prejudice. Not at all. It was about spiritual survival. They had just recounted their history and saw how time and time again, these alliances had led them into idolatry. So this promise was a direct protective measure to preserve their unique identity and worship God alone. Their second promise was all about time. And this was a radical countercultural decision. The world's logic then, just like now, says never stop producing. But their covenant logic said stop and remember who you belong to. They even took it a step further, pledging to forgive all debts every 7th year, a profound act of trusting that God, not the market, was their real provider. It was a complete reorientation of their entire economic and social lives around faith, not fear. And finally, they committed their resources. And again, this wasn't just a general pledge. It was a highly practical and systematic plan. They established a temple tax for operations, organized a lottery for the wood supply, dedicated their first fruits to acknowledge God's provision, and committed to the tithe to support their spiritual leaders. Every detail was designed to sustain their community's central place of worship. So you have these 3 big promises: purity, time, and resources, and all of them were building towards a single overarching idea: They were all expressions of one ultimate vow that captured the very heart of their covenant.
And this is the line that ties it all together. After listing all their specific commitments, they summarize their entire pledge with this simple, profound statement. This was the bottom line. You see, for the Israelites, the house of our God meant everything. The temple wasn't just a structure of stone and wood, it was the physical symbol of God living among them. So to promise not to neglect it was to promise not to neglect God himself. Supporting the temple was how they lived out their identity as his people. Worship was no longer just an option, it was who they were. So, why does this ancient story of a community signing a scroll matter to us today? Because the principles behind their promise are absolutely timeless. We may not be putting a physical seal on a written document, but every day we make choices that reflect our deepest commitments. The idea of sealing a promise is really about making an intentional, heartfelt decision about what will be most important in our lives. And those three foundational promises are just as relevant now as they were then. Guarding our spiritual identity against all the distractions of the modern world. Intentionally choosing to rest and worship in a culture that demands 24/7 productivity. And committing our time and resources to sustain the communities of faith that are important to us. These are the modern expressions of that ancient covenant. So the question this story leaves us with isn't just about what they did thousands of years ago. It's about us, today. Looking at your life, your time, and your resources, what are the crucial commitments, the foundational promises that you are sealing in your heart?